Roll Tide, everybody, and welcome to Cover Crimson. That's Clint Lamb. I'm Mick Gillispie. We're brought to you by Pearl River Resort over in Philadelphia, Mississippi. Mailbag questions today. You guys love to give the questions, and you can get in the comments section and comment, but we got some questions. UA players at Alabama can't afford to lose. And then what do you think the Crimson Tide's record's going to be this year? Undefeated. We're going to run the table. I know it. Thank you for being here. Let's get this thing started. And we do it every day. So make sure you're part of what we do. Like, subscribe, thumbs up, Roll Tide. All right, there he is, Clint Lamb. I'm Mick Gillispie, Cover Crimson, covercrimson.com, talking Alabama every day and answering your questions. The old mailbag, back at the mailbag again. What do you got for us? I love these.
Yeah, this is the perfect way to go about, the off season. Let people kind of dictate because there's 1,000 questions that people have. And we typically, I don't know if you've noticed this, but anytime we meet someone in person, they got about 40 questions. And It's just, that's one of the things last year we did the walk-ons thing with the next round guys, meeting people. I ended up having conversations with, groups of people for 30 plus minutes. Just they were asking questions. I was answering them. I was asking them questions, see kind of what they think about things. So this is just our way to kind of interact with you guys, give you guys a chance to actually hear about things that maybe you're wondering about or want to hear about. So that's kind of why we're doing this a lot more often during this portion. There's like a stretch here. We're going to be getting into some recruiting updates and everything else. That's definitely coming. Depth chart stuff. I think Jimmy and I this week, we're going to be talking about my depth chart projections. That should be, a fun episode. But for now, we're going to get into these mailbag questions. And we'll start with Dave Shoemate of SEC Unfiltered, which I thought it was a great question right here out the gate. Outside of the quarterback position, who are the 3 players Alabama can't afford to lose to injury in 2025? Mick, who would you say? I'll tell you what. You start off, maybe if you just want to go with one, you can. I can react. I can throw it out there. We can kind of go back and forth.
Oh, man. LT Overton. I think he's got to be healthy. I'm not too overexcited about the depth that Bama has up front. I hated to lose Payne in the transfer portal to Michigan. And I just kind of feel like this is a spot where, this guy's got to be disruptive. You build your defense around him. And, right out of the chute, that's who I think.
That's so interesting because in one sense, I agree with that. That makes sense. You're talking about a potential first-round talent on a defensive front that a lot of people say, where's all this premier elite talent coming from? Where's it at? It's like LT Overton's one of your guys. So if you lose him, probably not great. Now, here's the thing. He's not the first player that there was one guy that just was glaring to me that I immediately put, and I'll get to him after. But the second player, or I guess I kind of cheated and went players here on my list was Tim Keon and James Smith for the exact reason that you talk about with LT Overton. Now, from an impact standpoint, a disruptive standpoint, you're 100% right. LT Overton would not be a guy that you wanted to lose. I was more so looking at the positions, and I was saying, okay, Bandit runs 3 or 4 deep. You'd still have Jordan Renaud, you still have Kelby Collins, and the growth and development of Keon Keeley kind of could help, with some of that. When you look at like the Wolf position, that's another one that you start talking about like Quay Russaw and guys that you really can't afford to lose. But there's depth there where if they lost a guy like Russaw, you'd still have Pierre, you'd still have Jamarian Latham, you'd have a bunch of guys. But when it comes to the interior defensive line, that's where I think Alabama's really shallow. And especially with like Tim Keon was the first guy listed because in my mind, I'm like, okay, James Smith being kind of the more that 3 technique. If they lose him, you still got Edric Hill. You can play Kelby Collins. He's probably going to be playing some 3 tech quite a bit. You can maybe even play LT Overton in there if you had to and bring one of those mini bandits onto the field. That wouldn't be ideal, but I feel like you could replace that element probably easier than you could that 0-1 technique nose. kind of your run stopper, your big body guy. You've got Tim Keenan and you've got Jeremiah Beeman. And granted, you can play James Smith some there, but it's not going to be something that you want as like an every down guy, someone that you sub in for an entire series playing that position. Now, granted, there are going to be times where an entire series is nothing but both of your tackles are playing three techs outside shoulder of the guard. You've got the two guys outside of them playing outside the tackles, and you really don't have anybody playing that big body guy on the interior. But, I just think that your depth at nose would get very shallow very quickly if you lost a guy like Tim Keenan, and he is a good NFL talent as well. So that's kind of why I went with him. The number one player who stood out to me is the first guy that popped into my head when I read this question. It was Caden Proctor. And the reason being is, what do you do at left tackle if you lose him? We can talk about Parker Brelsford, how great he is. He's a phenomenal player. But if they lose him, you got Gino Vandemark, you got Joe Ionata, who I think could play some pretty good football. You've got Rock Montgomery. You've got some players. Now, there will be certain elements or things that you're going to want to do that you won't be able to do without a guy who has Parker Brailsford's level of athleticism. But I think you can get by with some other guys. You lose Jaden Roberts. It's Gino Vandemark. It's, it's Will Sanders. It's, potentially Olasolinen. Rock Montgomery's another guy who can play guard. Like, they have options there. If you lose your right tackle, Wilkin Formby, that could potentially be a problem. But I think Caden Proctor there on the left side, because what do? We know Olasolinen kicked out there, and he actually improved and was pretty serviceable. But we still don't know what that's going to look like when things are live and you're going against SEC edge speed. So it's either him or it's Jackson Lloyd or it's Arko Anugum. Like, just the options right now, there's so much uncertainty that I think from a depth standpoint, you have got to have Caden Proctor in your lineup. And then as you're developing some of those guys, if it happens towards the end of the season, maybe you can kind of withstand it a little bit better. Maybe Jackson Lloyd's ready to go. Maybe Arko Anugum is developed enough. We'll just have to wait and see. But especially early on, Caden Proctor is a guy you cannot lose.
Mm-hmm. And I almost said that too. I mean, it's funny when you said that, because that was where I initially was. Kind of him or Jalen Roberts, although you feel like Roberts has more guys that can slide in and do that. That's why Proctor's projected to be a first-round pick. And they've talked about him from the time he arrived at Alabama as being, remember they were describing him as Kobe Bryant, and then talking about the basketball player, like that kind of ability. This is the year where that kind of ability is going to be on display. So do we pick one more?
Yeah, I would say I have one more. If you don't, that's fine. We can just react to
I'll pick one more. Even though you have a ton of options at wide receiver and it's deep, there's only one Hollywood. There's only one Ryan Williams. And just the threat of him being out there, what he should be able to do this year, the bionic ability that this guy has. I think that it's because you can't replace him because you're not going to find anybody that's just crazy gifted like him. So even though there's probably some other positions where you're thin, like linebacker to me, you say linebacker, maybe, Deontay Lawson or somebody there, Jefferson, maybe, I don't know. But I just think that he is so amazing at what he can do that it really just takes that star factor out of your offense to not have him.
See, the way that I approach this, and there's no really right way, I guess. I'm sure there will be people who agree with you and some that agree with me. You're taking the star power approach, where it's like you have, very few superstars on any given roster. You've got a bunch of really good players. If you're going to win a national championship, you've got to have a lot of really good players, even a lot of great players. But those superstars, you take Jeremiah Smith off of Ohio State's team last year, and it's like, okay, they still are going to have good receivers. They still got a quarterback who's capable. They still got a great 1-2 punch at at running back. But Jeremiah Smith really added an element and a threat that really changed the way that defenses had to play them. I'm more so I'm saying I don't disagree with that at all. I more so was like, okay, what happens? If you lose Caden Proctor, even if you somehow luck up and survive with like an Ola Salinen, you're now in a position where you're one injury away from him from being in real, real trouble, which is why I really start to say, okay, who are some guys that's like, you just would 10 to 1 rather have, okay, don't know how I feel about Ola Salinen, but as long as Caden Proctor's not hurt and he's your number 2 guy, it's like, okay, you kind of feel a little easy about it because there is one potential solution there. If you start working multiple guys in, now you're in really, really big trouble. So Alabama would get extremely thin very quickly. It's the same thing with the interior defensive line why I went there. And it's the reason why I chose Josh Cuevas as my third guy, because I think he's going to be a big part of the passing game. But I mean, when you look at like the Y options, you got Danny Lewis, you got Brody Dalton, you got Jay Lindsey, you got Samarco. Like you've got big body guys. I don't think, I think right now Danny Lewis is pretty far ahead of everybody else. Maybe not a Brody Dalton, but I think you would be fine if you lost like a Danny Lewis. Not that it would be a good thing by any means, but I think you've got some potential options. What happens at that H spot if Josh Cuevas goes down? As far as the pass catching ability, now your offense, or at least your tight end position, looks a lot like it did last year. As far as the guys who are at the top, it's more so blockers who are very limited as pass catchers. I think they're wanting to evolve that position a little bit. And you would either need to change and have pretty much 2 primary blockers as your main 2 tight ends, or you would have to rely on a true freshman like a Marshall Pritchett, potentially like a Caleb Edwards, but Edwards didn't even enroll early. So, that's where I start to say, okay, you lose a guy like Josh Cuevas, and it's kind of going to change drastically what Alabama's offense looks like, because I do think that he's going to really complement what they have at receiver in the passing game and really provide and create some space for some of those other guys to operate. So we got 3 apiece. Are you ready to move on?
Yeah, I think so. That was a pretty fun test. I want to tell you guys, though, that we're brought to you by Pearl River Resort, Philadelphia, Mississippi. It's golf season. I mean, look, the weather's beautiful right now. Dancing Rabbit Golf Course is the Augusta that you can play. The Azaleas, the Oaks, 2 amazing courses, multi-million-dollar courses, and you don't have to have a membership. So check them out. An hour and a half from Tuscaloosa, 2 hours and change from Birmingham. It's fun. It's a fun place. They got everything you need. Slots at Golden Moon Casino, Silver Star, table games. They got the sports book, which is like Vegas style over there. And we appreciate them for doing this. And it'd be a great place for all of us to get together and hang out. They got plenty of room for us, full bars, all that stuff. So water park is Geyser Falls. That's open as well, and the spa. So take advantage of it. I actually would love to go to the spa because I've got like a pull in my neck here. I'm not even kidding.
Yeah.
Like it hurts to turn. They get you fixed. All right, let's get into a realistic record for Alabama. What is a realistic record for Alabama? Last year when Shank said 8-4, everybody was like, "Oh, whoa!" And he was pretty close. I thought they would end up 11-1. They could have easily ended up 11-1, but they they just kept blowing games they should win. They won the ones that they, all the flips, except Tennessee, but they just lost to Vanderbilt and Michigan and Oklahoma where they just didn't play well. So
so Weber is the one I want to give him credit. He's the one that asked this question. And so he said, looking at the schedule, what's a realistic record you expect for Alabama football this season? What would you say? I mean, where do you land on it, Mick? Because I think we both can agree we're expecting a step forward. You've added Ryan Grubb. You feel like the offense is going to be more in the image of Kalen DeBoer with who's going to be at quarterback, regardless of which 3 it is. You talk about the improvement in the wide receiver room, the offensive line's gelled more. It's a lot more used to Kalen DeBoer, and then defensively, everybody's expecting a step forward. Now, granted, you could take a step back at kicker, even though we barely saw Graham Nicholson last year, so there's not a whole lot to go off of there. But then punter, losing James Burnham, that's a big loss. We both agree that we feel like they're going to take a step forward compared to 9-3, right?
No, I hope so. I mean, if they don't, we're in big trouble. But the schedule's tough this year.
It is tough.
And you start to run through the Bama schedule. and I feel like I need to pull it up right now just because,
yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of losable games in there.
There are losable games for sure. I feel like this is my default, like every year, and I say this 1,000 times, but I could see 11-1. I could see 9-3. There is a scenario because if you don't make the improvements that we think as far as dropping games you're not supposed to, you can lose to two really good teams, and then you can drop one game. Even if you make a slight improvement and you go from losing to two teams you weren't supposed to just one, you can still lose two games on your schedule to quality opponents, and now you're sitting there at 9-3. So I can see 9-3, but 10-2, I feel like is a pretty healthy spot for Alabama. Now, I'm seeing the top 25 rankings and everything, and I'm looking at where people have Alabama, and I'm seeing number 7, number 8. You know, that's been pretty consistent in my opinion. Maybe an outlier here or there, one way or another. I feel like Alabama should be ranked higher than that preseason, and I'm really not trying to be biased. I just think when you're looking at a lot of these teams, there's certain ones where I can poke more holes in it right now. Now, granted, some of it is speculation, but that is all we're doing. I mean, the transfer portal era, you have no idea what you're going to get out of a lot of these guys. And so much of the roster is now turning over where it's like there's always going to be projection. But I think what Alabama did to fill some of these spots, I think they did a really good job of filling out their depth. And the fact that they didn't lose anybody in the spring transfer portal, the fact that they haven't really targeted anybody in the spring transfer portal, you hear Josh Payton, people talking to Kalen DeBoer and kind of their responses and information they're getting. And it's like Alabama, you can just tell the coaching staff feels pretty damn good about where a lot of these positions sit. If they were desperate, it's not that there are a lot of great options in the transfer portal, but if they were desperate for offensive line help, they'd be going to try to figure something out. And you haven't seen it. So I think they feel pretty good at least about where that position's at. So, I mean, I think 10-2 is the safe spot, but would you lean more 9-3, or are you going to be bold like you did last year and go 11-1?
The thing that bothers me is that they proved that last year that there's a lack of discipline, whether it's in the weight room or the planning after you win big games. I think Ryan Grubb's going to help out with that. But how are those first 4 games going to look? 5 games going to look? You know, you got at Florida State. I know Florida State was bad last year. The year before, they were really good. Then you got Louisiana Monroe. That should be a win. Then you got Wisconsin
at home.
At home, that's going to be a tough game. Let me tell you something. They want to win that one. We do too. It's going to be a tough game. Then a week off in at Georgia. Okay, so you're playing Florida State, Wisconsin, and Georgia with a brand new quarterback. Your first 3 or your first 4 games, right? So there's some losable games there. Vanderbilt is going to be one of those games. I hope we put a country ass whooping on them. At Missouri could be tough. Tennessee at home, I don't see us losing that. At South Carolina is losable. I mean, South Carolina jumps up and beats teams. LSU is going to be really good this year. You know that. They've killed it in the transfer portal. Oklahoma comes to town. They're going to be a lot better this year.
A lot better.
You think anyway, right? I mean, just from the talent standpoint, offensive coordinator, what they bring to the table. They got Eastern Illinois, that's a win, and then at Auburn, which, I mean, are we going to beat them every single year? It's been 5. So I think that I'd love to sit at 11-1, 10-2. But I don't know, man. I'm just worried about the lack of discipline. You know, the complacency after they beat Georgia to go in there and not play your best against Vanderbilt. And I'll say this, look, I've said it before. I knew Vanderbilt could beat us. I did a show on here with Mike Johnson. We both talked about it. I didn't think it would happen, but I knew it could happen. They were a good team, and we were kind of the first, you know, if we would have played them maybe a couple games, we maybe took them more seriously. But we never stopped them, man. Like that. It was like their offense just went right through us. They stopped themselves a couple of times. They clicked. I don't think it'll be the same this year. So I'm going to say 9-3. And I'm going to say 9-3 with a hoping that we figured out the discipline part of it. That we have can kind of take a step back into the Saban days where when you win, you make the next week tougher because you don't want to get that, as my dad used to say, get that big head, So I don't know. And I think part of it's that it's a tough schedule. And I think part of it is that the discipline part. So I'm going to say 9-3.
I still am not ready. Multiple years of a lack of discipline, I'll be willing to entertain that's a theme. I'm not ready to go there yet, which is totally fine. A lot of people, it's like they already showed it once, so they clearly showed they're capable, and I 100% agree with that. They're absolutely capable of being an undisciplined team. I just don't think that's a theme. I'm not ready to go there. The reason that Missouri, I saw a conversation on Twitter, and it was a question that was being asked, does Alabama have a trap game on its schedule? And everybody's breaking it down. Here, it's very simple for me. The trap game is absolutely Missouri. And the reason that I say that is this is how I see potentially it playing out. Alabama starts 3-0. They go to Athens against a top 10 Georgia team that's going to be hungry. If Kalen DeBoer beats Georgia twice to start his career at Alabama, ooh, I mean, the narrative there will be loud. And so Georgia's going to be motivated for that game. Not saying that Alabama can't win it. I'm saying I won't be shocked at all if Alabama comes out with a loss. They come out with a loss based off of what happened against Vanderbilt last year and the fact that they got to come to Bryant-Denny Stadium this year. I could see Alabama taking out an ass whipping on Vanderbilt after a Georgia loss.
Right.
Now, once that happens, Alabama's going to be 4-1. Their only loss being to a top 10 Georgia team on the road. And everybody's going to be back to singing Alabama's praises. Not only that, when you look at Tennessee's schedule, who's going to be coming up a week after Missouri, Tennessee, they are playing Georgia before they play Alabama. But if you look at the rest of their schedule, it's Syracuse, East Tennessee State, Georgia, UAB, Mississippi State, and Arkansas. I could see Tennessee being 5-1, going into, or I guess 4-1, because they wouldn't have played the Arkansas game yet. But going into that weekend where everybody's like, man, the showdown next week against Tennessee is going to be a top 10, 15 Tennessee squad versus a top 10, 15 Alabama squad. And after everybody starts singing Alabama's praises, if they handle business against Vanderbilt, you got to go to Missouri. And so if that's the type of game, like, I don't think Missouri is going to be great, but do I think they're going to be worse than Oklahoma was last year or worse than Vanderbilt was last year? I mean, no, not really. So it's like, that is going to be, when that game comes, if it plays out how I'm predicting, which it could play out 1,000 different ways, then I could absolutely say that's where we will find out what this Alabama team is about. Because if that's a letdown game for them, they allow that to be a trap game, looking ahead to Tennessee, coming off a big win against Vanderbilt. I don't know that then we'll be talking on that post-game show about how Alabama has a major problem as far as lack of discipline, lack of focus, and it's now a multi-year problem. So that's kind of, I think, you lose to Vanderbilt. That's one that I don't think anybody would be shocked about. I could see you dropping one more and going, 10-2. You could drop a couple more, but I think Alabama's going to be good enough and talented enough where they can get the job done, and they still have a one-game cushion and can still make the playoffs. Last question from Jonesy. What's more likely to happen, Mick? Overton leads the team in sacks, or Bray Hubbard and Keon Sabb combined to have 6 or more interceptions for the season?
I'm going to tell you, this is the easy one. It's the interceptions, because I seen Bray Hubbard throw a mullet 134 feet. So,
okay. I don't know where you're going
him.
with this.
He's a cool dude. I would love to have him come on and do a segment on here, like an NIL segment. He'd be fun to talk to each week. But no, I think in having Sabb back, I mean, he had 3 interceptions in a game this year. I think those guys are going to end up combining for more than 6 interceptions. And I think Overton could easily lead the team in sacks. I mean, he had the opportunity to do that last year. But to me, I'm going to go with those guys in the secondary.
So LT Overton led Alabama with 39 pressures last year. The next highest was Jahad Campbell with 20. He's gone. The third highest was Q Robinson with 19. He's gone. So the next highest guy in pressures was Tim Keenan, who's returning. It was Tim Keenan with 14 compared to 39 for LT Overton. Number one, they got to get more complimentary pressure. Now, granted, Q Robinson getting hurt, it affected that. But, with what they're having to replace, Overton is far and away ahead of everybody else. If he just does that again, I don't think he's going to get that number of pressures and not convert that into at least 6, 7, 8 sacks. And then you start looking at the positions like Wolf. I think there's going to be a heavy rotation there. Quay Rusall, Jermaine Latham, Yanze Pierre. Maybe you see some Noah Carter. We've talked a lot about, Hill, and we think that he's going to end up being a true freshman contributor to some extent. That's a deep rotation of guys where you might see a lot of bodies. I don't think it's going to be that many where everybody's playing, but I think at bare minimum 3, maybe even 4. Then you look at Bandit. Now, here's the thing. You've got LT Overton, you got Jordan Renaud, you got Keon Keeley, you got Kelby Collins, who's going to be an inside-out guy probably. But I just think he dealt with that last year because he was, Jermaine Latham was playing Bandit quite a bit, cutting into his workload. You had Jordan Renaud still acting as a Bandit 3 and being, also a piece of that rotation, and he still managed 39 pressures. So just doing what he did last year, I think, is fairly realistic. And then I would expect more of those to be converted into sacks. So I think he is going to lead the team in sacks, mostly because of the rotation at the 2 positions. And there just being too much of it. You might see a bunch of guys getting sacks, but nobody getting up there in 8, 9, 10, 11 range. But when you look at Keon Sabb, he had 2 interceptions. Bray Hubbard had 3 interceptions last year. And Keon Sabb missed a huge chunk of the season. So that was while they were kind of sharing with the guy who was the starter all year in Malachi Moore while they split. So now that they're the 2 starters, if that ends up happening, and it depends on how much Zay Mincy ends up factoring into this. But, I mean, to think they would just need, 6 interceptions, so they would need to just get 1 more than they got last year. I mean, I would also say that's fairly realistic in this vision-oriented defense. So that's why I thought it was a good question, because I can make an argument easily for either one of them. But I would say interceptions, a lot of times it can be more just happenstance. Like it's just how the game plays out. Quarterback makes a poor decision, whatever. So you can't really bank on interceptions. Like I feel like you'll be able to more so bank on sacks to an extent. And so I will say that I'm more confident that LT Overton's going to get or lead the team in sacks than I am that those 2 guys getting a combined 6 interceptions. But I will say I'm also very confident in that too, Mick.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, that was fun. It was a fun show today. I mean, just like getting in here and
questions were great.
Yeah. Love you guys in the mailbag. And don't forget, $75 for the entire year of covercrimson.com, 25% off the annual. So that's the deal we got for you. We're on there all the time, covercrimson.com, talking, cutting up, being part of this thing. Clint is really fun to interact with, and that's like his house over there. So he's inviting you to his house, and we appreciate all of you guys for being a part of what we do, and also to Pearl River Resort for making this this show their show, and reminding you that Dancing Rabbit Golf Course, it's the Augusta you can play. It's not that far, hour and a half from Tuscaloosa, 2 hours and change from Birmingham. And we will probably be over there sometime soon to do a show. So anyway, look out for Elephant in the Room with Jay Coker. We're working on our next episode, Clint and Jimmy Stein, all that stuff that we do here. Like, subscribe, thumbs up, roll tide, guys. Talk to you tomorrow.